Today we're talking about pitching. And this is a very important discipline for all entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are always pitching. You're always trying to convey a positive message about yourself and your startup because you never know who might be listening. You could be at a coffee shop talking to some of your friends about your company, and at the table next to you there might be a VC who could potentially invest in your business. Or maybe you're at a family gathering and your uncle's cousin might be the purchasing manager at an important conglomerate that could potentially purchase your product. You never know when those doors will open and when those opportunities will arise. So you are essentially always pitching as an entrepreneur. You always have your startup on your mind, and it ends up being the topic of a conversation most of the time. But not all entrepreneurs are very good at pitching. So today I'm going to try to give you a couple of tips and tricks on how you can essentially formulate your story around your startup in the most powerful way, in the most memorable way, so that people will be able to repeat this story and they can tell other people about what you're working on. And that might open even more doors for you. There are different types of pitches that you're going to deliver over the course of your entrepreneurial career. Many of you right now might be preparing what I call a show pitch, which is a 2, 3, 5-minute presentation about your company, but really where you can't do a deep dive on sort of the nitty-gritty details of your business, right? Because you only have 2, 3, 5 minutes to present the overall vision of your company and get people excited about what you're working on. The purpose of the sort of show pitch is either for you to win a competition, or it might be to get accepted to an accelerator, or it might be to basically get the first meeting with a potential investor. So the purpose here is really to deliver a powerful, memorable presentation about your company so that you can get people to ask for a follow-up meeting. The second type of presentation, second type of pitch that you might end up delivering in your startup career is a real investor pitch. And I'm going to try to dive into a couple of different topics that will be relevant for both of these presentations, but not going too much into the actual investor pitch, which is typically a 1-hour meeting where you might get to present for 15 to 20 minutes and the rest will be sort of a Q&A session with potential investors. I'll talk about some of the components you need in your pitch deck, and I'll also supply you with some pitch deck templates here in the link session below. One of the very normal things for most people, when we have to present in front of a large audience, we tend to get anxious and nervous. And that is a very sort of common situation. It actually is more normal to be nervous than it would be to not be nervous at all. Like more than 3/4 of all, more than 75% of all people get really nervous when they're speaking in front of a large audience. So it is very normal. And the good thing is that you shouldn't worry about being nervous when you're presenting. It actually makes the presentation a lot more interesting for the audience. If they can sense this kind of tension, this kind of energy because you're nervous, it makes it more interesting for the audience. What you need to do is try to get those butterflies in your stomach to fly in formation so you can somehow keep it under control and still be able to deliver a powerful message even while you're nervous. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks on how to calm those nerves and how to keep sort of stay focused and keep yourself under control even in those very stressful situations. But it's, first of all, just acknowledge that it's normal. It's a normal response to a situation where you are sort of separated from the group, because it's been imprinted in our minds from back in the Stone Age that if you are separated from the group, you are in the most vulnerable position, right? So that's why it initiates, sort of ignites this kind of stress response to that situation. But there are a couple of things you can do in order to fight this anxiety. Some of the typical consequences when we get anxious is that we have this reverse plumbing situation happening where some of those things that are, or body parts that are usually wet, all of a sudden get very dry. So inside our mouth, right, where we need to have that sort of liquid lubricating our tongue and our sort of entire speaking organ, that tends to get dry out, and that makes it very hard to speak, and you need to drink a lot of water. But then we get really sweaty, which is also sort of this inconvenient consequence of being nervous. So you start sweating a lot, so that's why you maybe want to stay away from some of those white or light blue shirts, because it can create some pretty bad sweat marks when you're on stage. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these videos with Steve Ballmer when he's on stage. Otherwise, look up on YouTube Steve Ballmer speaking. And you'll see that it has these very unintended consequences, that he gets very sweaty. Another thing that happens is that we start having this shallow breathing. We start breathing up here instead of breathing down in our belly. And that makes us even more nervous and more stressed, and we start speaking too fast, and people can't really hear what we're doing. So taking a deep breath will automatically calm our nerves and make us more focused, and basically enable us to refine that focus of our presentation. So a couple of do's and don'ts in relation to public speaking. First of all, remember that the audience wants you to succeed. They are there to see an awesome presentation, so they want you to succeed. They want you to do really well. So find those people in the audience who are smiling, who are happy, who seem to be positive, right? There are always people in the audience who have what I call an angry bitch face, right? You might know it, you might have it yourself, this situation where when you're relaxed, your face just tends to be really mad looking, right? And it's not because you are mad, it's just because you're focused or concentrated. But there's some people in the audience that would have this kind of angry bitch face, right? Where it looks like they are just hating you. They hate this presentation and they absolutely hate everything you're saying. Don't focus on those people. Focus on the people in the audience who smile, who are into it, who you can sort of play off of. And much better to just focus your energy, because when you smile, they will smile back to you, and that will boost your confidence even more. You also need to try to focus on having a positive self-image. And that is simply believing that you have something valuable to share, that you are good enough to be there. Right? I remember starting out as an entrepreneur here in San Francisco when I came to my first networking event, and I didn't think that I belonged there. I didn't think I was working on anything that was important enough and that anyone would care to even hear about my story or my startup. And that made me sort of too humble and too much of an apology for myself. You know, I wasn't confident, and I was also signaling to all the other people that I wasn't that interesting. Right? So it's very important that when you walk into that networking event, or when you walk up onto that stage where you're presenting, that you have a lot of self-confidence, that you have this positive self-image of who you are, and that you're working on something important and awesome. That will automatically make a lot of other people more interested in hearing your message, and it would also sort of make you more sort of attractive for other people. They're going to come to you because they want to see and hear your message. One technique that you can use, invented by Amy Cuddy, she has a very, very famous TED Talk, I think it's viewed over 40 million times, where she talks about this technique called power posing. It has later on been debunked whether or not it's as powerful as she initially identified in her TED Talk and in her research. But the main idea is that you can take some kind of power pose, a very masculine pose, either like Wonder Woman or Superman here. You can take your arms above your head, you can take them behind your neck and sit in a chair. Like some of these very powerful positions. And the argument is that by taking one of these powerful positions, this kind of power pose, you will automatically boost your testosterone level. Right? This hormone that makes you aggressive and powerful. And at the same time lowering your cortisol level, which is that hormone that makes us anxious and nervous. So I have done this quite a bit with many of my students around the world, and I have found that if you do some kind of power pose, for example, by taking your arms above your head and saying, yes, you know, by just trying to do this, you would automatically boost your level of energy. You will smile a bit more, and you will be more excited. So having done something like that right before you get on stage, and I know there are many famous performers that have this routine right before they get on stage, they sort of need to pump themselves up and get excited to get on stage. And the audience will see this. And the argument here is that you can be up to 30% more convincing. The audience will find you 30% more convincing if you've done some type of power pose prior to getting on stage. So why not give it a try, right? It might work for you. I'll definitely recommend doing something like standing up straight, feeling more powerful and ready and confident before you enter that stage. Mark Twain, this famous American writer, said, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one." And this seems a little counterintuitive, but it's very true. Like, perfecting your business pitch will take time. And it's actually a lot more difficult to deliver this short and concise and crisp business pitch compared to just blabbling on about all the different features in your product and all the different problems you want to solve. So you need to put a lot of time into distilling the essence of your company and the most interesting and relevant and memorable aspect of your company that makes it really interesting for the audience. So when we're trying to deliver this elevator pitch, the goal is really to buy yourself more time, right? When you're presenting, the first 10 seconds should get people hooked so that they want to hear more. That is the goal with the elevator pitch. It is not to close the funding, to get people to write you a check. It is simply, the goal is for them to hand over their business card to you and to say, great, let's meet for coffee tomorrow. Then you can celebrate have succeeded with your elevator pitch, because now you don't have 30 seconds in an elevator. Now you actually have 20 minutes over coffee with this important person who could change your life if she invested in your company, right? So the goal of the elevator pitch is not to say everything, is to say just enough to make people more curious. Like, just remember that. It's about sparking the curiosity and get them to ask you for more information. Don't try to overwhelm people with too much information. That will turn people off. It's better to leave a lot of things out and just say enough to get people more interested. So here's an example of a 2-minute business pitch. I know many of you might be pitching for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but in 2 minutes you can actually do most of these things. Check out this little video here of a company called CupAd by Josh.
My name is Josh Light, and I'm the CEO of CupAd, and we believe that we have the most effective form of advertising available in the market today. Our advertisements are exposed to customers for 2,220 seconds on average. Now, what kind of advertising has that kind of exposure time? Ladies and gentlemen, we advertise on coffee cups. That's right, we put your brand in their hand. So how does coffee cup advertising work? Well, we got an advertiser. They pay us money. We produce paper coffee cups with their advertisement or brand on it. Then we give these coffee cups to coffee stands for free. Now, why does someone want to advertise on a coffee cup? Because it takes an individual 37 minutes to drink a cup of coffee on average. That person's going to have to look at the cup, drink, look at the cup, drink 20 times before it's fully consumed. And that person's going to move around like a mobile billboard, exposing that brand to at least 6 different individuals before that cup is drank. What's in it for CupAd? We make 13 cents of profit on every single cup that we distribute. And what's in it for the coffee stands? Well, when most people think about coffee stands, they think about Starbucks. But what about the 25,000 coffee stands in this nation that have plain white cups like this? They don't have the economies to scale to put their own brand on the cup. So we give them free cups. They save $15,000 a year by not buying cups. They like these savings so much, ladies and gentlemen, that approximately 80% of the stands that we've contacted have signed exclusivity agreements to distribute our cups. And what kind of momentum have we started for this company? The last month alone, we got 58 coffee stands in California to sign exclusivity agreements with us to distribute our cups. If we continue to get 58 coffee stands every single month for the next 12 months, we will have 700 coffee stands at the end of the year. With 700 coffee stands, we can move 8 million cups a month. And at 13-cent profit, 8 million cups a month, we're making over $1 million of profit every single month. And we've already started this, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, our first customer, Overstock.com, will see their cups hit the California market in 21 days. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was pretty cool, right? I mean, in just 2 minutes, you can convey a lot of information. I know he speaks very fast as well, but another aspect that's really important here is that when you're doing this kind of show pitch, you only can find time for so many things, and what you definitely want to try to do is follow this important structure of your pitch. And there are generally 4 key elements you want to talk about even in this short show pitch: problem, solution, market, and business model. And if you have a really strong team, that will be the 5th element that you also try to highlight. And definitely in a real investor pitch, you also want to talk about the team. But if you only have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you want to focus most of the time on these 4 key elements, right? So start by explaining the problem. What is the problem you're solving and why should we care? Try to get us hooked. I will talk more about this later, but try to use an element of storytelling to emphasize the importance of solving this problem. This is where you want to make the audience care about the problem you're trying to solve. If you don't succeed in getting the audience excited about the problem you're solving, they probably don't want to pay attention to your solution. And that is very dangerous. So that's why I always start by using some kind of storytelling. It could be a single example of a user who's suffering because of this problem today, and why you think we need to solve that. When you're talking about your solution, so you've described the problem using storytelling and maybe some stats about how many people are suffering and how severe it is. Now you want to talk about your solution, and you want to mention the core features of your product, obviously, and how it's superior to all existing alternatives. And I strongly recommend you have some kind of demo or prototype as part of this presentation of your solution. Something that makes it easier for the audience to understand how this works. You can have an explainer video, potentially. You can have a demo where you show the wireframes of your app or your software solution, or maybe you have a physical product you can show people. But something that makes it more visual, and something people can connect to in a different way than you just talking about it, right? It's all about showing, not just telling us what it is. Live demos can be very powerful, but also very dangerous if it typically fails. So I would say try to instead record the live demo and just show the video of the live demo. Maybe you can talk over it so it sort of appears to be a live demo, but it's actually not. That's a way, sort of a fail-safe, that if the internet connection dies or if whatever happens, right, there's always something that goes wrong. So bottom line, find a way to really present this in a powerful way that people can easily understand what you're doing. Steve Jobs famously said when he was presenting the iPod, you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. Right? It was not about 5.12 gigabytes of music, it was about the benefits for the customer. So there's a golden rule in marketing that says that features tell, benefits sell. Right? If you want the audience to get excited about your product and would want one, you need to talk about the value for the user, the value for the customer, the benefits they get from all these different features that you have in your product. Don't fall into this very common trap of just talking about features. Right? A lot of engineers, like myself, we would love to talk about the features of our product and how it works and why we are able to do what it does. But that's not so interesting for the audience, especially not in a show pitch. You just want to talk about the benefits for the customer, not the underlying technology, at least not at a D level. So many pitches will allow you to have a couple of slides, whether you use Prezi or Keynote or PowerPoint or whatever it might be. You can use these visual aids in a very powerful way, obviously. Just be careful, because visual aids can also be very distracting. For example, if you're using Prezi and you keep zooming around to different places on the screen, that's very distracting. Or if you have too many slides and you're clicking over these slides too fast, then people also get very distracted. The most common mistake is that people put a lot of text on their slides. And that is dangerous, because your audience will then have to choose between focusing on you as a presenter or reading your slides. And unfortunately, you will typically lose that battle, because people are so curious that they want to read the slides. And that's not ideal, because the investors won't invest in your slides, they're going to invest in you, right? So you want the attention to be on you. Never, never, never talk to your slides, and don't use your slides as speaker notes. If you need speaker notes, that's perfectly fine. Have them inside your hand, tattoo them on your arm, whatever it is, right? But those little note cards, that's perfectly okay. Just don't put a lot of text on your slides. I don't want to see any slides with bullet points. It's awful, right? Don't do that. Rehearse your pitch so you know what's in it, and if you need speaker notes, have them in your hand. The slides should be visual, and you only want to have one key point per slide. When it comes to describing your market, and this is obviously a very important part of your pitch, because all investors would want to know, how big is this market? If it's not a big market, the opportunity isn't that big. And then it doesn't matter if you have the best product or service in the world, because you're still not going to be able to return the investment to your investors. So you need to make sure you describe that this is a huge market with a big opportunity. But you want to be concrete. Don't say huge market. Say how big it actually is. And you can calculate this using a couple different methods. So the top-down version of describing the market is that you simply take the data from some of these reports, like Gartner or similar reports that describe different types of markets and how big those markets are. That will be the top-down version, similar to describing, well, there's a $500 billion market here. The other more interesting way of calculating the market is a bottom-up calculation, where you show to the investors that you know your market, you know the numbers, and they can sort of follow your logic when going through this calculation of how big you think the market is and how fast it's growing. So you can see here on the slide, pause the video, read through this slide if you're interested in that, or go back to the previous presentation where I talked about one of the previous modules where I talked about market assessments. Apart from just basically calculating the size of the market, it's also good to sort of visualizing it using this TAM, SAM, SUM model. So total available market, serviceable, addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market, or also called target market. So this is a slide here for Airbnb. We can see that the number of trips booked worldwide annually is 2 billion. Right? And then the budget in online trips, 500,000 trips, and they estimated their initial target market to be around 11 million trips annually. And now you can calculate this TAM, SAM, SUM both in terms of number of potential trips, or number of potential customers, or revenue potential for TAM, SAM, SUM. And that could be a powerful way of sort of displaying the size of the market, and for the investors to see that you've done your homework, you know sort of where you're going, and that this is a big opportunity. Another way of looking at the market and displaying this could be to have some kind of matrix where you are displaying all your competitors and existing solutions, and you're visualizing to the audience where the gap in the market is today and how you're planning on fulfilling that specific gap. So that could be another technique to use when describing the market. Show me the money is, of course, also very important. So when it comes to describing your revenue model and how you actually got to make money, investors love to see some kind of graph that goes up and to the right at an exponential rate, right? So we want to see that this has enormous potential and that this is going to be a phenomenal opportunity. So when describing your revenue model, you want to, again, focus on just the top 1, 2, 3 revenue models. Don't list 10 different ones. If you have 10 different revenue models, You're just telling the audience that you don't actually know how you're going to do this. So focus on a few simple, concrete, easy to understand revenue models that will still provide you with exponential returns one way or another. What affects the audience the most is not just what you say, it's how you say it. So it is not enough to just have rehearsed the specific words you're going to use in your presentation. You also need to practice how you're going to deliver that message, right? As you can see here, it is actually the non-verbal aspects of your presentation that will stand out the most. That's what the audience reacts to, and that's what they remember the most. So don't just focus on the words you're using, also focus on the way you're delivering this message. Focus on eye contact. Focus on having a positive body language and have some kind of body readiness. You want to be proud of what you're presenting, so feel like there's a wire pulling up your chest. Right? Don't stay crunched over. Never put your hands in your pockets. It gives you a bad posture and it makes you look really arrogant. So much better to find a comfortable place where you can have your hands above your waistline and you can have the hands under control, and then you can use them to show a prototype, point to something at your slide, whatever it might be. But otherwise, stand up straight, find a comfortable place where you can have sort of shoulder wide space between your legs. Don't try to sort of wrap your legs around each other. I know some people really love to do that, but you're just not standing in a very good way. And you need to concentrate on just standing upright. So shoulder wide space between your legs, stand upright, take a deep breath, and essentially just focus on the different areas, the different groups of people in the audience. If you have a big audience, make sure not to neglect certain corners in the room, but definitely focus mostly on the jury if you're pitching to an investor panel. So those are a couple of basic tips and tricks, and you can remember this power pose as well. Try to give that a shot right before you go into the presentation. Have some kind of energetic outburst, or at least take one of these power poses, and that might also boost your confidence and how the audience will perceive you, right? Because it's all about the perception of the audience. So finally, have a good posture, smile, be positive, control your hands. Don't have these kind of weird tics. Like some people, when they get nervous, they start scratching their hair, their ears, their nose, whatever it is. So that's why you keep them under control and then use them to show things on the slide. And finally, don't have too many slides and really focus on limiting the amount of words per slide, because you don't want the audience reading off your slide. You want them to focus on you. Practice makes perfect. The best way to practice is to actually video record yourself, because that will be the way you can be your own worst critic, and you can rewatch that videotape and look at all those weird little tics you might have as a presenter, and then try to eliminate those before you go on stage. So definitely strongly recommend you to video record yourself and see if you're happy with the way you're doing things. Otherwise, speak in front of friends and family, get feedback from them as well. Don't just read your script, you actually have to speak it out loud several times. Good presenters generally spend about an hour of rehearsing per minute of presentation. And if we're talking TED Talks and these type of super well-delivered presentations, those people spend probably between 4 and 10 hours per minute on stage rehearsing, right? So it takes time to be a powerful presenter, but it will pay off tenfold if you do it well. So practice as much as possible. Finally, here's some pitch advice from David McClure, who's one of the founders of 500 Startups, well-recognized VC here in Silicon Valley, has seen thousands of pitches and worked with hundreds of companies around the world. So he has a couple of good insights on what he believes are the keys to a successful business pitch. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your startup pitch.
My name is Dave McClure. I'm the founding partner and chief troublemaker at 500 Startups, an internet seed fund and accelerator in Silicon Valley. I've also been known to lead troops of geeks on a thing called Geeks on a Plane. So I've actually spent a lot of time working with companies on pitch decks and pitch preparation. Probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with several hundred companies and entrepreneurs. The biggest thing is really to be succinct in what you're presenting and be credible. And there's a couple of basic things that I think are important. Just because someone's pitch is great doesn't mean that you can, do that too. But I think understanding what techniques are best for presenting your story, and like I said, I think being specific, even really talking about vulnerability and failures in a way that build credibility. I think too many people try and go after the big dreamy story, and with the very few exceptions, that usually doesn't go well. Most of the times you're not there, or you're not credible in telling those stories. And a lot of times just being able to connect with your audience on a very human and emotional level, and hopefully demonstrate some expertise. But sometimes sharing your failures and factually explaining what you haven't been successful with is better at building connection and credibility with the listener than telling some fancy story that makes you sound like a used car salesman that's not believable. So usually what I recommend to entrepreneurs is to focus on telling the problem first and about the customer or the person who has that problem. And really you can connect much more strongly with people by just not even explaining the solution, really just talking about what is the problem, getting to some emotional connection with them about that. And often that'll earn time and attention for you to then have a more in-depth explanation of what you're doing without people losing focus or attention. I think some basic tips are just if you already have some amount of significant traction with customers, either in usage or in revenue, you should very quickly try and get that clearly out. So we often say if you have traction, lead with traction. So talk about specific customers, usage numbers, revenue metrics, anything like that that really is clearly explicit and factual. Get that out in front early. If you don't have that, maybe talk about customers who have problems and what they would be interested in seeing solved. Maybe you can also talk about unit economics for customers. So even though you don't have a lot of revenue base or customer base to start with, you can talk about acquiring customers costs us X dollars, those customers generate Y dollars in a certain period of time, and maybe talk about areas that you have defensibility or things that you can do uniquely better than other people.